Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Sync and Flow, the podcast. This is episode 17, and I'm so excited to be recording today. It's been quite a while since I have recorded a podcast episode, and fear not, I am back. And today we are sitting down to chat with Izzy Ripley from a betterworldtobleedin.com. And yeah, I'm really excited. Today we're going to be chatting about all things cyclical living, how to understand your cycle on a better level, how to chart your cycle, how to use your cycle as an inherent form of birth control, and understanding your fertility and all the different layers and levels of self-awareness and self-intimacy that this brings into our lives. So welcome, Izzy. I thought we could just start off with a quick little cycle check-in.
It's so nice to be here. Thank you, Josie. It's great to be on. Should I check in?
Please.
It must be like day 23 or 24. I'm about to get my bleed on Christmas Day, I expect. Oops, I should turn off my and I'm feeling really good actually, because normally I have well, not normally, but I've often had quite an intense premenstrual experience. Maybe we'll go into that a little bit, because that's really
Mm,
my way into all of this work
mm.
was through that challenge and that experience. But I've been really working with that recently, and really just bringing a lot more de-stressing practices in, and I'm feeling good. I'm also kind of on holiday, so that helps. But yeah.
Amazing. I am on day 25. So I usually get my period around day 29 or 30. And yeah, I'm also feeling pretty good, pretty connected to myself. I also have a deep history of very intense premenstrual syndrome, PMS. My Red 10 facilitator actually calls PMS provide me space, because there's just such a narrative change that we need to kind of start creating for ourselves around the premenstrual phase and the power of the luteal phase, really. And, whether that power is channeled through rage or emotions or crying or tears or, sexual empowerment. There's so many different ways that we can channel the energy of the luteal phase. And I think often when we have these very intense PMS phases, I always tell my clients, the body's way of communicating to the conscious self, the body's way of saying, please pay attention to me, look after me. There's something out of alignment here.
And I think that there's this misconception that we're kind of ourselves when we're in our ovulatory phase,
Yeah.
and then we move into the next phase, and it's like, I don't feel like myself. And that's that's a painful feeling, because
Mm.
to actually feel like I'm not myself when I'm completely in myself, yeah, it's something that can be really painful and is not easily fixed in one cycle. But luckily, we have that cyclical experience where we get to practice over and over again and learn what works best for us and
Totally.
listen again and again.
Totally. And what I love about cyclical living is it empowers us in every single stage of our menstrual cycle. And so even if we don't feel like ourselves in our luteal phase, maybe that's an invitation to discover, who are you in your luteal phase? How can you feel more like yourself in this phase? What measures can you put in place to make yourself feel more connected, more whole, more supported? I definitely have found a lot of personal relief in my relationships, especially intimate relationships like family and partners, by communicating with the people around me, like, hey, I'm in my menstrual phase, I'm in my luteal phase, or I'm about to start my period. Can you just be a little bit gentle with me? And I think this is such a beautiful invitation for others to show up for us in a deeper way, but it also kind of gives us that sense of deeper safety within our home environment and within our intimate relationships. And I think the best part about cyclical living is understanding yourself on a deeper level so that you can communicate yourself on a deeper level to others, so that you can feel more held, more understood, more empathy, more compassion from those around you.
Mm. Yeah, I think that idea of, what did you say? Give something space, PM space.
PMS standing for provide me space.
Provide
Yeah.
space. Yeah, that's just, it's beautiful. And I think that, and also the safety piece that you brought up, is, for me, those are the two like golden nuggets of what I need for my premenstrual phase.
Mm,
And I remember at first finding it really difficult to express those
mm,
things to others because of that lack of safety that I felt, where I felt that, okay, I want to say this, I want to express how I'm feeling to others, but because of the menstrual shaming and the taboo, feeling like, oh, if I say this, people are going to see me differently, or people are going to think I'm weak, or all of that stuff was coming up so strongly for me at the beginning.
yeah.
Yeah, I've worked through that now, but just like saying that, because that, I know that is something that is felt as well.
Yeah, totally. Thank you for bringing that up. It's yeah, we do experience so much societal shame, and even just in conversations, especially with men, I'm always like, how are they going to react to me? What are they going to say? What are they going to think? We get so in our heads about these sorts of things, and then actually like men are the most chilled. They're just like, okay, cool, like
Yeah.
sweet, like, they kind of want to like get it over and done with, like talking about it. So they're just like, yeah, cool, you do you, like live your best life. Like I'll be aware. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had some super nice interactions, even with like almost complete strangers that I've been staying with, or like,
Aw.
um, and I'm just like, okay, yeah, like, what do you need? And yeah, it's nice.
Super sweet. Yeah. And what do you have? I mean, do you have any tips for any listeners that may be still in that kind of difficult PMS stage? I mean, I know personally I was super emotional, super chaotic, very up and down. Like I had like I mean, I almost thought I had PMDD at one stage, but that was I only found out what PMDD was afterwards. And for those who are listening who may not know, PMDD is an actual medical diagnosis, and it is like PMS's bitchier, more depressive sister. And if you are experiencing like very heightened PMS, just know that you're not alone and that there are outlets for you. And what Izzy and I really focus on is providing our clients with natural alternatives that aren't based in, pharma, drugs, and are really just getting at the root of the issue. Because, like I said, the PMS is just it is just the surface level of the issue, and there is a deeper root issue that is buried within your womb space, within your period, within your body. And so creating that self-intimacy with the womb and with the body, that is, yeah, really where the healing starts to happen. And Izzy, I was wondering if you had any tips for anyone who's navigating a particularly difficult PMS phase, or just some of your self-care top tips.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's such a big, it's such a big topic. And what I would, yeah, what I like to talk about with PMS is, there's almost like two sides to it that we have to hold at one time. And there's that side of it where we can approach it as this like physical medical issue,
Mm,
where we're thinking, okay, well, do I have all the foundational factors in place in my life. Like, am I eating enough? Am I sleeping enough?
Mm,
Um, am I nourishing my body in the right ways for what it
mm,
needs? And how am I managing stress, and what's my relationship to stress in my life?
mm,
And so we can really approach it through that lens. But we also want to be holding the other lens, which is more the kind of the spiritual aspect and the cultural
yes.
aspect to it as well, because our the the society, the culture that we are swimming in, there's so much. It just really doesn't hold um the dark side, like the dark side of the
Yes.
moon.
Yes.
It's all about, the our ovulatory selves, summer,
The light
the
feminine,
light.
yes. Yes.
Yeah. And so this dark feminine aspect, this dark moon side, which is that premenstrual phase, it's the menstrual phase. Um, it's got such a huge history of shaming and
Mm,
taboo and all of this. So just knowing that that's what you're also up against, I think is really helpful to not feel like to not be so individualized as like, "Oh, this is a problem with me as an individual, and it's
mm,
because I'm not doing the things right, I'm not being healthy enough." Okay, yes, let's look at that and remembering that PMS can be hugely alleviated by just eating breakfast every day, getting in
mm,
protein in the morning
mm,
and also getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep at night, yes.
mm.
And also, we're up against this whole cultural thing at the same time. So, in terms of, yeah, like, kind of tips and dealing with it in the moment, um, I think anything that can really, like you were saying, connecting you with your body, um, kind of dropping you down out of the thinking mind
Mm,
is so wonderful, and I love things like yoni steaming,
mm,
um, massage, um, and these things are that they also have like a scientific basis to why they are also so powerful as well, because it's those practices which are more in the dark and more sensual, and they are helping you to increase your oxytocin flow, which is like this
yeah,
incredible balm for the cortisol and the
yeah,
stress hormones. And so, yeah, like anything that works for you that can be, whether that's like dancing, those like rhythmical movements,
yeah.
spending time in your room with like the lights low, or like one of those like, I love
Salt
those salt
lamps,
lamps.
candles,
Yeah,
yeah, they're my favorite, the
candles, like,
lights, yeah.
yeah, just like cocooning yourself, creating like that womb space for yourself. Just to really, because I think often there's this like psycho
Yeah,
spiritual thing,
psychosomatic, yeah.
yeah, where the body is afraid because you're heading towards your bleed and you're not acknowledging that.
Yeah,
And when we bleed, we it's not just a romantic idea that we need rest, we need like care, and we need to slow down. We actually, like, that's what your period needs to happen.
yeah, on a
And I think,
biological level, the
yeah,
body needs this, yeah,
yeah,
totally. People just think it's like this woo-woo thing, and like some girls can do that, and like I can't take time, but it's like, no, babe, your body on a biological fundamental level needs this to function.
yeah. Like, I love comparing it to even just, like, to, like, peeing and pooing, we do when we need to pee, we go and do it, and we do everything that's needed for that. When we need to
Mm,
poo, we let that release happen, we're not
mm,
like,
holding it
"Oh,
in.
no, like,
Yeah.
I can't go, like, I must, like, put a tampon up my butt and, like, stop that from happening." Because
Mm,
no,
mm.
it's a cleanse, it's a biological necessity,
Yes, yes.
and so I think and on this, like, yeah, psychosomatic level, it's like a little bit of fear going into your period, that your body knows you're not slowing down, and it knows
Mhm.
that it's not gonna get what it needs. So
Mm.
there's also that, like, tension thing happening, so
The
I just
reaction. Yeah,
yeah, and then that's increasing the stress and increasing the tension and increasing the symptoms of PMS.
yeah,
So anything you can do to just signal to your body, it's okay, like, I know what's happening, I've got you, I'm gonna slow
yeah.
down. Yeah.
Yeah. I talk about this so much, and it's so beautiful that you bring this up in this way. It's like the body has its own separate intelligence that's separate from the mind, and I learned this the other day, but 80% of signals that the brain receives come from the body, whereas only 20% of signals the body receives come from the brain. And so there's more signals flowing up to the brain from the body than there is from the brain flowing down. And so that means that we have to actually prioritize the body first and almost take care of the body as if it's this like separate animal. It has its own intelligence. We have a heart intelligence, we have a gut intelligence, we have a womb intelligence, we have even like a kidney intelligence and a liver intelligence, as the Chinese focus on so specifically. But yeah, it's really like this understanding that just because you feel fine in your mind doesn't mean there's not like pockets of tension or stress or tightness in the body, specifically around that reproductive area. Us as women, we hold so much emotion in our hips and in our pelvic bowl. And yeah, to really allow ourselves to go into that through yoga, through yoni steaming, through massage or self massage or whatever dancing practices, like anything that's, like you said, going to drop us out of the mind and into the body is really going to help create that deeper intimacy. And through that deeper intimacy, your body's going to start to feel safe and held, like you said. um
Mm.
I would love for you to explain. So your website is A Better World to Bleed In, and I love that so much. And I would love for you to just explain to like, what does that mean to you? What does that phrase mean to you? How does that look? Envision
Mm.
us with your beautiful vision of
Yeah.
what does a better world to bleed in mean for womankind. Ah, so powerful.
Thank you. Yeah, I would love to. Um, I suppose it's really at its core acknowledging that when we as individuals create a world for ourselves where we feel safe to bleed and where we can have a good or even just neutral relationship with our period, with our blood. We are creating a we are creating that in the wider world as well and for the wider collective. And I really think it starts with menstruation and it starts with our relationship to our blood. I think we've spoken about this before as like one of the immediate things that you are curious about with a person that you're working with. Like, what's your first experience of your period and your menarche, your first period, and what was there for you in that time? What did you not have? What do you wish that you had had? And just acknowledging that that entrenched relationship with our with our period can inform us, for the rest of our bleeding life. Um, and I think, you know, it always, because for me, it always comes back to whatever's going on in my cycle. I can return to my menstruation time and kind of reset and like go from that foundation then into the rest of my cycle. And I've really just found that, like, there's a dream that so many of us have around what we would actually love to be available to us when we have our period. And I think it's that, like, ancestral remembering of the red tent,
Mm,
and this desire that we have to just be able to fully give in to bleeding and to give into
mm,
our cycle, and that point of our cycle, especially that deep, dark feminine point, which is just like, that's the what I see as, like, the biggest issue with our entire society, is this un lack of being able to hold that dark feminine aspect, and just the
mm,
denial of it, and the shaming of it, and the violence towards it as well.
mm,
And so I think in that reclaiming of what do I really, and being able to actually let ourselves vision into, okay, what would it be in an ideal world for me? How would I feel around my period? And every woman, if you actually were to listen to your body, you would want to rest. You would want to be in the dark. Like, will happily say that to you, even if you think that you don't, and you think that you want to be doing cartwheels and, like, playing tennis. I actually don't think that's true. And I think
we've
that
picked our minds.
and there's this fear of actually claiming that, because we know it is so far away from us
Yeah,
in our culture. And
yeah,
so I just feel that that reclamation of, what is actually a better world, what would that look like for us to truly claim that menstrual phase. And I just think that would change, the world would be a completely different place, and it would
totally,
be just switched on its head in terms of our priorities and what's important to us as a culture at large. Like, there's
totally.
just this, the capitalist production, like, masculine focus of, like, out and da, da, da. It's it's that it's the acknowledgement and the praise of literally the pole opposite of what
Yeah,
menstruation represents.
yeah,
And so if we were to just switch that on its head, and
mm,
worship that dark feminine time, that
mm,
menstruation, that blood, that, the whole way that the world would function would change. And I think that would be great for everyone. I think that would be great for men. I think that would be great
mm,
for us all. And
mm, mm,
yeah, and I think
totally,
that's the vision, really. So it's a big
totally,
one.
totally. It's super deep. It's super big. It's super. Yeah, it's a big dream I think that both of us have, and what does that look like on an individual level versus like how do we allow ourselves to take up space and advocate for our own agency and sovereignty within that state, and being able to ask for what we need and communicate, well, first and foremost, like knowing what we need on a biological level for ourselves and being able to give that to ourselves. Then there's the whole action of communicating that, and then there's like, okay, how does to our close friends and family, and then how does that like spread into cultural and social practices. I was even talking to my ex around, like, he had a very forward thinking company, and I was like, hey, well, you guys like rarely see yourself as a forward thinking company. What about introducing period leave? What about offering that to your female staff? And just like trying to have these conversations with men who don't even think like, oh, what is it like to be at work navigating painful periods? Like, I don't think a man has ever had that thought cross his mind, and it's very like, it's so, and because we're so ashamed, we don't talk about these things, and therefore they're not like widely understood, and so we're just kind of expected to just get along with it and get on with it. But I think it's like the more we can start to invite, especially men, into our internal world and the way that we function, I think we can start to have a lot more social reform around how do we treat bleeding women, how do we um and the same for pregnant women. How do we treat bleeding women? How do we treat pregnant women? Like, how do we look after them and how do we make them feel nourished and supported? So it's such an interesting conversation, and I really, really love that phrase, a better world to bleed in. It's so
Mm.
beautiful. I would love for you to, so for our audience listening, Izzy is a FAM coach, a fertility awareness method coach, and I would love for you to just, yeah, explain what that means. I feel like it's so a part of my world, but I feel like so many people still don't really know what this is, and just bringing this awareness that there is an alternative to women out there that is based in natural birth control, that is based in body awareness, body literacy, and just self-empowerment, really.
Mm. Yeah, so fertility awareness method it's an umbrella term because there are lots of different methods,
Yeah.
and it's any method of observing the body's signs of fertility. So the main signs that most methods cover are the cervical mucus, the basal body temperature, and the cervix position. So across the cycle, these three elements have different ways that they shift and manifest, which you can track, and they will allow you to recognize when you're in your fertile phase and when you've closed that fertile phase as well. Um, the method can be used to, yeah, as you say, to avoid pregnancy. Um, in any given cycle, regardless of the irregularity,
Mm.
you're only fertile for around actually 6 days. You'll hear people say, 8 days or 7 days. But when we actually look at what's happening in the science, you understand that it's only actually possible to conceive on around 6 days.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, if we don't want to be on the pill, we don't need to be. If our goal is to avoid pregnancy, we can use the method to figure out that fertile phase and avoid sexual contact or use other methods during that time. We can also use the method to um, conceive. And, we're told that like have sex and you'll get pregnant. But
Yeah,
then
yeah,
often
we're
when
just
we
conditioned that we can get pregnant every single day of our cycle. And that's why I just want to take a moment, because it's like, babe, did you know you can only get pregnant a maximum of 6 days of your entire cycle? It's like, this is not
Yeah,
common knowledge, even though this is based in hard science. It's
yeah.
crazy that we're not taught this.
Yeah, it's completely scientifically backed up. There are really great studies increasingly happening now. I think the bad reputation that FAM sometimes gets is based on um, like I guess it was in the maybe 80s when the main method that was being used was a rhythm method. So
Yeah.
it was based on your cycles being exactly the same month to month, which is so not
Oh, it
common. Like
actually is.
none of us
Yeah.
have that. And it was also, yeah, it was based on ovulating on around day 14. And so loads of people use that method and they got pregnant. So now it's unfortunately been given this reputation. But just knowing that like the method that I'm teaching is the symptothermal method, and the most recent study showed that to be 98% effective, which is the
Wow.
same as the pill. It is effective. And yeah, back to the conception part. We're taught, you're gonna get pregnant, and then you maybe start to want to conceive, and it starts taking you, it's not happening, month
Mm,
after month.
mm.
And then you start going down the route of, oh my God, I'm infertile, IVF, what's happening? All this
What's
stress, and then the
wrong
stress
with me?
becomes, yeah.
Yeah. Increasing
And
your
then this,
cortisol because you're worrying so much.
yeah.
Doesn't help the cycle at all, as we know.
Yeah, and so FAM then can come in as such a incredible tool because
Mm,
you're able to identify exactly when the best times are for you to conceive, and it can just cut away all of that bullshit. And then the third thing that we use FAM for is just for monitoring. I say just, but it's for monitoring our entire health of our body, which
mm.
is huge because as a person with a menstrual cycle, or really anyone, like your fertility is your is is a fifth vital sign. So if there's anything going on with the rest of your health, your menstrual cycle is gonna be like the canary in the gold mine, and it will show up for you before even you've recognized that there's something else going on. So really intimately knowing your menstrual cycle, the whole of it, not just your period, like knowing what's going on in my follicular phase, when am I ovulating cycle to cycle, how long is my luteal phase, getting to know your fluids, getting to know your temperatures, tracking your symptoms, when are they starting, what da, 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 is just such an incredible way of being sovereign over your health
Yeah,
because um yeah, because it's your fertility is, I like to say, is like the soil of where your most vital self emerges.
totally. Totally. And it empowers us to become our own healers first, our own doctors first, and it's like, I think there's a really big issue in our Western world where we constantly are giving our power away to the experts, and the experts, and I say this with quotation marks, is always someone outside of us that knows better, that has a this degree and has done this research and that research, and we make it so much more complicated than it actually needs to be. And as Izzy's proven, like, you don't need to be a medical doctor in order to understand how the menstrual cycle works, in order to understand your body, in order to know these things about yourself and about health in general. You can learn this through observation, through listening, through taking notes, through tracking. Um, and I think
Mhm,
it's such a powerful way for us to reclaim, like you said, that body autonomy, that body sovereignty, where we can understand um what is going on within our own body without needing a doctor to tell us, because we are living the subjective experience. We are the ones having the symptoms, experiencing the PMS, experiencing the migraines, experiencing the painful sex, whatever. And if we can start to gather this subjective data, we can start to see patterns emerging. And, oh, this symptom comes up during this phase of my cycle, and that symptom comes up during that phase. And, this is a symptom of hormonal imbalance. And, you can really, like, this information for women is so vital. And I really, when I did my fam course beginning of last year, I was like, this information should be taught in schools, whether or not women choose to use FAM as their birth control method. This information, every woman should know this, regardless of whether or not they use this method as their birth control. And because it's just such vital, basic information, like really understanding your body literacy. This is like it's like the pinnacle of being a woman, is like understanding yourself from the inside out so that you don't feel shamed and disconnected from yourself. I get so passionate and worked up about this.
and it's the it's the only way that we can have informed consent
Mm,
around when it comes to making choices about our body. Like,
yeah.
if we don't know what's going on, and we are in this paradigm of always, outsourcing to an external expert,
Mm,
we're stuck in this paradigm of, I don't know myself, I need someone else to
yes.
tell me what to do. And when we're in that frame of thinking, I don't think true consent can happen. And
Yeah.
I always think, the best, it's always a great comparison is like around birth, and it's all the same world, like you've said, menstruation and birth, and how we're treating birthing people. And I think, when we're making choices about our body, if that's, am I going to have a home birth, am I going to have a hospital birth, we're not making real choice until we actually know what the implications of those different choices are. And I think that's the
Mm,
same with our fertility. How can we make an informed decision about going on the pill or having this, surgery for period pain, unless we actually deeply understand the implications of those things and also our other options. And yeah, I think you're so right to say that, like, this is so much more than just birth control. It's
yeah.
this, like, it's really how we can counteract the sad lack of individualized care that we
Mm,
that we have in the
mm,
medical system. And yeah, and even just like, I know so many people who are dealing with something like intense period pain or this symptom and that symptom, and going from their, very, they're holistic and they're alternative, and they're just going from these alternative therapy to alternative therapy, and like they work for some time, but then, you stop going, and it gets bad again, or like it's because you're still in that framework of outsourcing to the other, and not like you say, being your first port of call from the very beginning. And what fam gives you, what this education gives you, is this um yeah, just this sense of, I know what's best for me, and I'm choosing this therapy or that thing to, because I know it's going to support me because of ABC. It's yeah, it's just taking away that, and it goes back to safety again, like you're able to feel safe because you've got yourself.
yes.
It's not, you're not safe because someone else is looking after you. You've actually got yourself.
Yeah. And that's so big for us as women who, yeah, we're constantly told that we're not safe in this world. We're not safe to advocate for ourselves. We're not safe to self-express. We're not safe to be sexual and empowered and expressed. And yeah, it's such a big thing for us as women is like finding that internal safety. And that all comes from that nervous system regulation. And I can promise the listeners this, that if you work on your nervous system, your cycle will become so much easier, so much more soft and gentle, and you won't experience such high highs and such low lows, and things will start to balance out. I mean, even just on a hormonal level, cortisol, the stress hormone, is produced by taking components of the hormone progesterone. And so when we're stressed, our cortisol increases and our progesterone decreases. And when our progesterone decreases, we, go into hormonal imbalance. And that's when we, experience really bad PMS and really uncomfortable luteal phases, because the whole point of the luteal phase is for that progesterone to be dominant and to provide that anxiety, stress relief. The progesterone, actually, I've heard um some people, some women call it the oracle hormone, because it really allows for this inner stillness to start to cultivate, and from that inner stillness we can start to receive messages from ourselves, from our deeper psyche, from spirit, source, the universe, from, you know, our higher selves, whatever you want to call it, however you kind of associate with a higher power. And that is, I think, so beautiful. And often, you know, we may feel lost in this world, and I think the more space we can create during our luteal and menstrual phase for our own connection to our own guidance system, whatever that may be, however that may look, you know, the more we can actually start to feel much more, like you said, like safe within ourselves, anchored within ourselves, supportive of ourselves, because we understand our deepest selves. We've met those deepest, darkest parts of ourselves. And if we in those spaces can transform our relationship to shame and to the expression of those really dark places, I think that can start to create so much more liberation from within the soul, from within the body, from within the mind, you know, and we become these like really powerful beacons of light, and really a permission slip for other women to embrace their deeper, darker selves, to, you know, explore themselves, to go on this journey of, yeah, because the self-healing journey is a journey of cultivating deeper levels of self-trust, self-embodiment, self-power, self-expression, and self-intimacy, really. And the more intimate we can be, excuse me, with our internal world, I think the more we can, like you said, advocate for what we need, and therefore make more informed choices, because we're actually navigating from that internal subjective experience, rather than just being another symptom on a list, or just being another patient in the waiting room, or however you want to, you know, phrase that metaphor. And
Mm.
sometimes, your, like you said, you know yourself best. And often, unfortunately, doctors are so overwhelmed with, like, they have a million patients and they have 100 patients a day or whatever. And, you know, they really are overwhelmed in terms of like how many different people they have to think about. It's almost like a mother with like 100 children and having to think about all the different individual needs. And unfortunately, like you said, personalized patient care often gets lost. And a lot of women experience medical gaslighting, you know, which is doctors telling women that their symptoms are irrational, or their symptoms are, you know, not based on fact or science or whatever, you know, and that they're making it up in their head. And that can be really, really damaging for our relationship to self. And so, yeah, the more we can cultivate this really deep internal relationship with ourselves, I think it just, it like conditions us that like being in self-service, you know, I always like speak about how we need to reframe selfish, the narrative of selfish, but it's actually about being in self-service. And so, and realizing that taking rest is not selfish, it's in self-service. Prioritizing nourishment is not selfish, it's in self-service, you know. So I
Mm.
think the more women that are deeply nourished in their own self-service, like the better world we have, you know, especially I think about mothers. If mothers are more taught how to be in deeper self-service, maybe they can transform their children's lives in a better way, help their children grow up more self-aware, more conscious, more um yeah, more connected to themselves. And you know, that's what we really need right now. We need a society that is more self-aware, more self-connected, and all the ripple effects that that has on our society.
Mm. I think, yeah, I think that we've done such a disservice to the idea of self-care. I think it's been like taken and just just distorted by capitalism and like all of these things that you can buy for self-care, and made it into this kind of gross, like, yeah, like this idea of selfishness. It's just so not that. It's yeah, what you're saying is that self-care is actually collective care,
Mm,
because
mm,
it ripples out.
mm.
And I just wanted to also just like pick up on what you said about cortisol and the
Yeah,
nervous system.
let's get nerdy.
And
I love it.
huh? Nerdy, yeah.
Yeah, let's get nerdy
I love
about
this
the
stuff.
menstrual cycle and hormones because we're actually not educated about this shit. And it's just like,
Yeah.
it's
And
so great to learn about this.
it
Please.
really is, because when you like, we actually know this stuff intuitively, but we've been so dis disconnected from our intuition that it's hard to trust. And so it's great when we have the backup of science. Like
Yeah.
I love to have those two things, because it just puts me at ease with like, okay,
Mhm.
well, I knew that like rest was so important to me, but here's also the science of like why it's so important, what's actually happening. And I think in the menstrual cycle, we have access to all of these different consciousness states, right?
Mm,
That when I first started like learning about this and remembering it really from like a remembered place, um, I'm like, oh my God, like I have access to like a psychedelic experience when I'm on my period. And I don't, I might choose to do a plant ceremony, but also like that's there's a literally a different consciousness state and different brainwave state that is available to you on your period, or is available to your brain changes, the makeup of your body shifts, the when you shift through different phases of your cycle. And it then makes it kind of simple that it's like, okay, well, how can I just support that more? How can I, instead of it being like, okay, I want to, um, I need to rest, or like everyone's telling me I should rest during my period. Um, Actually, no, it's like more a curiosity of like, okay, well, what do I need to actually elevate what's already happening in the experience and the possibility that is there for
mm,
me?
mm.
It's so much less dry. It's so much less just like, oh, I've got to rest now.
Yeah.
Um, when I just wish that I could be out and about. It's like, no, now I get this chance. I've gone past ovulation, and now I'm returning inward to myself, and like what's within there that's there for me to like experience, that like you were saying, that gem of like the spiritual connection, and the yeah, like it's hard. I find it hard to even put into words, because
Yeah.
it's so profound. But
And so personal as well. It's
yeah.
so hard to It's so hard to communicate the liberation that you feel within when you are on this path of connecting with your cycle and, meditating with the emotions that are coming up during your luteal and like self-reflecting and journaling. Like, it's so hard to communicate the profound sense of liberation that you start to feel when you do this work because it's so subjective. It's so subjective and excuse me. Yeah, and women who are on synthetic birth control or hormones, or whether it's the IUD or the pill, it's really hard to communicate what it's like to be in a body that's not influenced by these synthetic hormones. And I mean, I've gone through pretty much every stage of birth control you can be on, from the pill to the copper to now using fam only, and it's like every different phase that I was in, I was like, whoa, like I need to rediscover myself all over again, like sex on the pill versus not on the pill, sex on the IUD versus not on the IUD, like my, the level of orgasm, my pain, not pain, like it's just there's so many different factors, and all this beauty of cultivating these connections, and like you said, the brain waves, like the actual brain waves of the woman's brain changing when she is menstruating. It's like that, those effects, those positive effects that we get from these hormonal fluctuations in the body. If you're on hormonal birth control, you're not getting any of those positive benefits. And I think we often, I just want to bring an education piece, is that we often think like, oh, we just need these hormones because like, oh, we need to have a period. But these hormones are so necessary for so many different other parts of like bodily function, like, progesterone and heart function and estrogen and, all these other like synapses, connections, and like transmitting of hormones that are micro hormones. And I mean, I obviously don't know as much as you may know. Maybe you can give some of that, but yeah, like we need these hormones not more for more than just fertility, for more than just having a period. We, even women are told by doctors still like, oh, you don't need a period, and it's just like it's fucking crazy, the
Mm.
brainwashing that we as women have received around like the the biological and scientific reasons for having a period in the first place, and having a cycle in the first place. I think it's been so
Yeah.
overlooked and so patriarchy like whitewashed away from our understanding of what it means to be a woman in a bleeding body and have a womb.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up I love that you've gone there because it's, you know, to take it even further with
Please.
that, like, why do we need to have a cycle? Uh, in Chinese medicine, especially, it's understood that your fertility is your creative essence.
Mm,
And if we really think about it, it makes so much sense because we have in our bodies the possibility to create life, right? Which is like the ultimate creation.
mm,
And what is creating a baby? It's actually taking consciousness and like ether and directing it through our bodies and making it into matter in the physical world. Like we have that power. And okay, so I'm not choosing to have a baby, but I still have that power. That's still a power available to me. And it's through that fertility possibility and that cycle that we create our ideas and our visions. It's how we bring consciousness into matter, whether that is a baby or whether that is our ideas and our creations. And so to shut that down, that creative cycle, it's it's such a sad misunderstanding of like who we are here to be as humans in this world. Like we have this incredible consciousness, right? Which is so unique. And it is something about like that sourcing that and bringing it down and pulling it down and making it real. And so you know, what's actually the implications of for a huge generation of women shutting off that system, that creative essence? Like it scares me when I think about actually the wider implications for like our species, you know? Because yeah, that's what are we actually shutting down?
literally, I'm getting like goosebumps, truth shivers like everywhere all over my body because it's such a big, real conversation. And like I said before, it's so hard to communicate this personal experience of what it means to live in a body where we cycle in an embodied way and we cycle consciously and we are connected to our womb and our body and our hearts and ourselves in this deep soulful way, it's so hard to communicate the implications of how much better our lives are. Like, if you think about your life before cycling consciously and your life after your womb awakening journey and your conscious like awareness around your period and healing your relationship to your shame and all these things, it's like I just think about my younger self and I'm just like, I feel so sorry for her, like I feel so
Mhm.
much empathy and compassion for this young, wild, passionate person that was just so misinformed and so uneducated around
And get
herself
it, probably.
and gaslit. Oh my God. Did I
Yeah.
live an emotionally gaslit childhood? If there's anyone that can say that, it's me. And oh my God, it creates so much more trauma in the long run. It creates
Mm.
so much more trauma. And yeah, I was on birth control for like 9 years, 7 years on the pill, 2 years on this copper IUD. And it really created so much trauma that, like, still to this day, I am repairing the trauma, not only within myself, but within, the destruction that my emotional outbreaks and like PMS psychotic phases of being like had on my family and on my relationships. And yeah, it's
Mhm.
just it's
Mm.
crazy to think about ourselves before we had this awareness and the spiritual awakening around what does it mean to be in a body with a womb.
Yeah.
And so really the work that I'm doing with this podcast and with Sync and Flow, it's really first and foremost about the education, because there's such a big education piece missing from the woman's health um conversation.
Mm. I think, um, it's so it's so powerful to validate women when they say, "Oh, I'm thinking about coming off the pill. It's fine, like it works well for me, but I just have this feeling that like it's not right, or like I just have this like it's so common to hear that, like I just have this like inkling feeling that I just want to see what it's like, and it's like yes, that's the feeling, like that's
Your
the
intuition.
your intuition, like coming up and saying, there's something different, there's something more. And
That's the true self.
yeah, yeah. And it's then the gaslighting comes in with like, oh, but it's the pill works for you fine. Like you're not having any symptoms, or, well, it's easier for you to just be on the pill because, and it's like, no, like listen to that's what we all have to do, right? It's like listen to that small voice that just keeps coming back and like knocking on the door, because
Yeah,
like doing a little scratch, because that voice is what opens up so much and opens up a whole journey.
of
Um,
self-discovery. Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
And I don't know if we have time, but I really wanted to talk a bit about,
If you have time.
yeah,
Cool.
because you started talking about sex, and I think that that's a really important part of the conversation, especially with,
Please steer this conversation any way you want to go. I'm here for it. All the controversy, all the nuance, all the things.
um, yeah, because, I it's such a different one of the main things that people bring up to me when I talk to them about fam is, well, firstly, it's like, okay, I'm just like terrified of getting pregnant. And then it's also around this um whole thing about like, oh, I'm more horny when I'm in my fertile phase.
Mm,
So like how am I gonna deal with that? And yeah, I just wanted to talk a bit about the difference energetically of like sex when you're using FAM versus when you're on the pill, because
Please.
where it's so different, the levels of responsibility and the levels of like
Self.
connection to, yeah, and awareness of that, like, you know, if it's a man and a woman, that like there is the possibility of life being created. And when we're on the pill, we don't have to consider that or think about that at all. And that sounds great, you know, but the more that I like the more that I've involved myself with fam, I can't imagine like going back to that paradigm anymore, because that's it's a paradigm where my body is supposed to then be ready for penetrative sex at any moment,
Yes.
right? Like that's actually the message of the pill, is
Yeah.
like we're in this static state of infertility, which means sex in theory can happen at any moment. And my experience now of my sexuality is so fluctuating.
Yeah.
And I'm not, you know, I want different things at different times. And I just think like to think of going back to that stasis, I'm just like, I, you know, like my mind, like you're saying, thinking back to like your past self, and you're just like, wow, it's so profoundly different.
Yeah. It's
Uh,
almost like living blind, you know, it's like operating blind, you know, without this awareness. I mean, when I was on the pill, I was also like, I was just throwing myself at men. Like I wasn't embodied in my sexuality. I was just like, yeah, I wasn't embodying my sexuality. I wasn't having sexually profound experiences. I wasn't having like an embodied self-awareness. Like you said, you're not like you're not aware of the nuance of sexual energy because your womb is completely shut off and all your sexual energy is coming from your womb. And so you're not aware of like the different phases of even just a sexual encounter, you know, and like you said, like just being ready for penetration at any time, like that sounds really abrasive and kind of like violent and like really undernourishing and uncaring. And like there's really nothing more damaging to the feminine body than like undernourishing sex. There really
yeah,
is nothing more traumatic, I find.
yeah, literally gives me shivers. Yeah.
Yeah, and having that like nuanced awareness of, you know, like what do I need? And there it comes back to that self-advocacy. Like, what do I need in a sexual encounter to feel safe, for my heart to open? Because the heart is so deeply connected to the womb, and the womb is so deeply connected to the yoni. And so, you know, sex becomes so much deeper. And I think we get to experience ourselves on, I mean, I know I can say this for a fact. I was on the pill, now I'm not. Like the difference between having a sexual encounter versus on versus off is just profoundly different. Like you said, it changes your entire paradigm and the entire way that you see yourself and the way you're able to just embody your pleasure on a deeper level because
Mm.
you you know during and I always say this, like the pain and the pleasure is a two sides of the same coin. And so the deeper that you can embody, a lot of women experience, I mean, I'll speak personally, grief during their luteal phase, you know, whether this is ancestral trauma coming through or personal trauma coming through. The luteal phase is really the best time to do shadow work. And if the listeners have listened to my cyclical living episode number 4, they would know this. Like the luteal menstrual phase is the best time to do shadow work, to do trauma release, working with these darker aspects of the self. And so I find that the deeper you can work with those aspects of self during the luteal menstrual phase, which is almost like this time where your body's like, okay, cool, don't focus on anyone else but yourself. And that's also really beautiful in its own right. um the more you can actually start to experience your pleasure when you're in a pleasurable state, because you felt the very depths of your pain, of your grief, of your sorrow. And now you can allow yourself to experience the very depths of the other side of the coin, of the other side of the spectrum, which are the pleasure, the joy, the bliss, and become
Mm.
more deeply embodied in your sexual experience, in your orgasm, allowing for that. I also think a lot of the shame that we work through when we heal our relationship to our menstrual cycle, that shame is, translatable to our sexual shame. And we're kind of working with this shame, this same essence of shame, whether it's around our menstrual cycle or around sex, it's kind of the same substance, really. And so it's like, then you can allow yourself to be more erotically expressed, more vocal, more expressive. Your orgasms can be more intense because you just allow yourself so much more space. And I think that allowance, and this is where I'm coming to the point of this whole rant, is like that allowance comes from your relationship to your menstrual cycle, to your body, through the different phases.
Mm. Yeah, so well said. I'm glad I brought that up.
Yeah, please, please, because it's such a nuanced understanding of self, such a subjective
Yeah.
understanding of self, and it's hard to communicate that in words because it's so psychedelic. It's so personalized. It's so like your own experience of your own emotions, and maybe some triggers come up, maybe they don't, but it's just like, how can we navigate our lives with more care, more attention, more nourishment,
Mhm.
more nuance? And it's
Mm.
really beautiful, and it's really deep, and it's a lifelong journey that we go on. And it really,
Mhm.
when we stay consistent and dedicated to connecting with ourselves in this way, it bears really powerful fruits. Really, really creates life-changing experiences, life-changing bleeds, life-changing orgasms, life-changing sexual experiences, life-changing conversations with people where you can actually feel seen and heard and validated because you know how to give that to yourself first and foremost.
Yeah, I mean, everything you're saying, it just sounds to me like, yeah, I just get this image of just more color and like more
Mm,
this range as well that you're talking about, like just
variety.
that
Yeah,
gentle like expansion of range and color. And it's not about, yeah, it's not about being happy all the time or
yeah,
like being, it's about knowing that it's safe to feel along that whole spectrum.
totally, totally. I
Mm.
think biggest one of the biggest soul lessons that I bring to this world and to the women that work with me is this unapologetic embodiment of who you are, and in
Yeah.
all your beautiful facets of the pain and the emotions and the chaos and the crying, and but also on the same time, like the bliss and the joy and the activation. And I just think it's so beautiful when we can hold space for all of this. And I mean, knowing in my own journey, it's like this is how we create more personal power as well.
Mm.
The feminine's power, the woman's power comes from her darkness and her ability to have a relationship with that darkness. It's not from the fluffy light feminine. It's actually from the deep womb centric
Mhm.
space of
Totally.
depth. Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
This has been such a beautiful conversation. I'm so happy to have had you as a guest. Thank you for being here. And I was wondering, is there any leftovers, anything else you would like to share with our listeners before we start to wrap up?
Mm. I feel I feel very good about the conversation. I'm always a slow processor, so sometimes things come up afterwards and I'm like, oh, that was, I wish I had said that. But I
Okay.
guess, yeah, just that self-acceptance piece, and that it is a continuous journey, and that something that I've struggled with, which I'll just be like very honest about, is being in this work and s- struggling with feeling, that I'm still so deeply with on that journey myself.
Mm.
Um, and that there are times when I just feel like I haven't got it, and I've, I've reverted back, or you know, these voices come in of like, oh, I should be this or that if I'm putting myself in this position, and um, speaking about these things, and just, yeah, all this like the self-criticism, which is just, yeah, you just have to dance alongside her, and she's
Mm.
going to be there, but making friends with her being there, and
Mm.
just keeping on going wherever you're at.
Oh, so beautiful. Thank you for that. And for those interested in finding out more about you, oh, I would love for you before we wrap up. I did your Yoga Nidra the other day. For those of you who don't know, Izzy's also a qualified Yoga Nidra teacher, can I say, or facilitator, more is a better word. And I would love for you to just quickly share on how you see Yoga Nidra like a part of this conversation.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. It goes back to the nervous system piece, really, because it was so powerful for me in learning how to rest, because when I was really in the depths of my intense PMS, and just knowing like I've got to find a way to slow down, I've got to find a way to turn my bring my thoughts down into my body, and just this, I've got such a like thoughts brain that like
Don't we all?
yeah, don't we all? And I was like, I've just got to bring it down. Like, how am I going to do this? And I discovered Yoga Nidra, and that style of meditation, because it's very guided the whole time. Like, you're really rarely left with silence, and it's also very body focused. So a huge part of it is the body scan, where you go through each point of the body. Um, it was my gateway into being able to meditate, because it was my it was a teaching in how to systematically just like drop away from that thinking brain into the body. And it was a savior for me in my luteal phase, in my menstrual phase, because nothing else that I was doing allowed me
I'm
to
inviting your higher self to my
access
audio.
that silence. And oh, did I lose you?
Sorry, I'm here.
Um, yeah, nothing else allowed me to just drop away from my thinking mind in that same way. And it was the beginning of like my nervous system healing journey. So yeah, that's why, because like we were saying earlier, the connection with the nervous system and the menstrual cycle is so powerful. It's just this amazing tool for if you're struggling with um yeah, dealing with stress, like if you're struggling with the thoughts going, the adrenaline going,
Mm.
um, I just think it's a fantastic tool. And then I realized like, oh, I don't only need it in my luteal phase and in my menstrual phase. If I also practice it in my follicular, in my ovulatory, I'm then like, I felt every time that I'm like topping myself up with
Mm.
peace, and with wiring that connection in my brain where I can drop into rest much quicker, and my brain can drop into the slower brain waves. And um yeah, the practice just compounds, like the benefits just really compound. And at first, if you're quite like sleep deprived, if you because I recommend, like, I love doing it in the day, because sometimes if you just do it at night, you just fall asleep, and that's amazing. But also when you do it in the day and try and retain awareness and awakeness, you can drop into the sleep state in the brain, but maintain the awareness online. And that's when you can plant like seeds of intention into your body that then like blossom in
Beautiful.
life.
Yeah,
And
that liminal state is super powerful for manifestation and subconscious rewiring and
yeah,
behavioral and pattern interruption. Yeah, wow.
yeah, it's actually the basis of hypnotism. Yeah,
Okay.
it's the same. You're systematically going into the hypnagogic state, and then yeah, you can just plant all of these incredible um, intentions there,
Beautiful.
which yeah, for the menstrual cycle is incredible as well.
I love that so
Um,
much. I heard this quote the other day that was like, overthinking is under feeling. And it just like, I was like, wow, that is so powerful. And so often when we are experiencing, challenging PMS, and like you mentioned, the inner critic, which becomes even louder in our luteal phase, so much of that overthinking, self-criticism, judgment, like, perfectionist traits that are coming up within the mind space, it's really just like that is just too much energy within your brain. And it's like you said, like bringing that down into the body and balancing out that mental heaviness by, focusing a lot on body-based practices, is really just going to start providing some relief and balancing out and really just reminding you to, if you're overthinking, you're under feeling. So if you want to feel more, drop into the body, because that's where the feeling and the emotions and the intuition is all present. And once we're in the body, very rarely do we not know where to move from there. From what I'm
mm,
saying is like we need the body will guide us, is what I'm saying. The body
yes.
will guide us forward, like whether it's, like you said, rest, whether it's nourishment, whether it's alone time, whether it's socializing, whether it's going outside, whether it's sleeping, having an afternoon nap, like whatever it is, just ask your body what it needs and it really will guide you. And often it whispers very softly, very gently, very lovingly. It's often the ego that's very loud and in our face, but the intuition and the messages of the body are soft and gentle and quiet. And it's about creating that space to receive those messages and creating that connection.
Yeah, which is why I love Yoga Nidra, because it has that essence of softness and gentleness, and it's so the idea is that it should be effortless, and that's
Yeah.
as like a perfectionist and that strong self-critic, really tapping into effortlessness and
Mhm.
surrender is just
Mhm.
huge for me.
So
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah. So beautiful. So please
Should I tell?
share with us how
Yeah.
we can work with you. I know you just released a new program.
Mhm. So well, you can find me at my website, abetterworldtobleedin.com. My main offering at the moment is that I'm taking the first cohort of this new program from January. It's called Tending the Soil,
Mm,
Fertility Awareness Method Mastery. And it's different from what I've offered before because I've been undertaking a new training with Lisa Hendricks and Jack. She's the author of The Fifth Vital Sign, and she's a leading expert in fertility awareness. And it's really going a lot deeper than it's covering the avoidance of pregnancy and the conception part, but it's also going so deep in the monitoring your health side. And I thought I knew so much about like cervical mucus and all of these things, but I have really stepped up a level, and that's what I'm wanting to share in this new program. So I'm looking for anyone who is, potentially struggling with some intense symptoms of their cycle, or maybe you're like on a journey of trying to get a diagnosis, or maybe you're really struggling with infertility, or just, yeah, as big as you like. I'm really wanting to give you Fertility Awareness Method as this lifelong tool for, everything that we've spoken about, really being this anchor to being the expert in your body, which is your birthright, and to holding you throughout whatever process you're going through. And we learn the Fertility Awareness Method very in depth, and then we also will analyze your charts as you go forward, and I'll show you how you can really read your chart in depth. So yeah, what's your cervical mucus saying? What are your symptoms saying in relation to your hormones and in relation to your fertility signs? And then very individualized like protocols and processes that you can apply to support you in whatever you're struggling with. So yeah, that's stuff around like nutrition and all of those foundational factors, and then also all of the latest like research and knowledge around supplementation or alternative therapies. And so really giving you a plan and a way to look after yourself and care for yourself from that place of like really knowing rather than just outsourcing.
So beautiful. Thank you so much. All of Izzy's links and everything to her website and her Instagram will be in the description below. So please go and check her out. She's doing really amazing work in this world, and I'm super grateful to call her a sister and a friend. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. Very grateful.
Thank you, Josie. I've loved it.
Oh, thank you so much, sister. We'll connect soon, and many blessings for your Christmas and end of year time.
You too. Have an amazing, restful holiday.
You too, sister. Ciao for now.
Bye.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode and engage with all the wisdom that was shared. If you enjoyed this podcast, please remember to leave a review on your podcast platform of choice, as this really helps this wisdom reach new people. If you have any questions or queries, please feel free to reach out to me via Instagram DM or send me an email. You can follow me on my personal account on Instagram at Josie, Josie _Thorne, THORNE, or you can follow Sync and Flow, my business accounts, at Sync, that's spelled SYNC _in_flow. Please feel free to reach out with any questions or queries you may have. Otherwise, get in contact to book a free discovery call to start your self-healing spiritual journey today. I look forward to hearing from you, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now, loves.